Hey guys, Robbie here from CFSB Nutrition at CrossFit South Bend. Today we're going to be answering the question, is salt healthy or not? So this is a really big question with a lot of different details to it, but I'm going to try to make it as simple for you as possible and practical in this video in terms of the answers that we're going to give. So just like any question we ask here about whether anything's healthy, whether it's whey protein or chocolate or alcohol, it depends. It depends on the person and the context, but I'm going to try to give you some broad general outlines to help you practically understand how to incorporate salt into your life in a healthy way. So first thing, where do we get it? So part of the reason salt gets such a bad rap is because the vast majority of it that we get in our diet is from junk and processed foods. And why is it in there? Two main reasons. It makes the food taste a lot better, and number two, it helps, crappy food stay on the shelf through the apocalypse. It essentially makes it really shelf stable. Salt is a preservative. So part of the reason there's such a bad association with salt is because of these junk and processed foods. But the truth is, salt is absolutely crucial for overall human health. It's absolutely crucial. And the idea that salt is unhealthy for us, I think has a lot of negative effects, both in terms of health and performance and even just quality of food, right? Like, most good food involves some salt in the form of seasoning or tasting or things like that. So when it comes to real whole food, we need salt to get adequate amounts of sodium. There's not very much sodium in beef. There's not very much sodium in kale. In real whole food, you don't get very much salt. So typically, you'll need to add salt as a form of seasoning or as an addition for flavoring, because unlike potassium, which you can get in large amounts in things like potatoes or sweet potatoes or plantains or butternut squash or bananas, you cannot get salt in adequate quantities on a daily basis from real whole food. So why do we need salt? Why is salt so important for overall health? Well, for a number of different reasons, but I'm going to highlight some really important ones when it comes to health and fitness. Salt, or sodium, is an electrolyte. It's one of the most important electrolytes in addition to potassium, magnesium, and calcium. This is one of the main things that keeps us well hydrated. It's not just what you drink that matters for hydration, it's whether you are able to absorb it and utilize it, and you can't absorb it and utilize it without adequate sodium. This is one of the reasons why athletes will add salt to their water, or why they'll have electrolyte solutions, because you can't actually absorb the water otherwise. So you might be one of those people who's like, hey, I drink a ton of water a day, but I just keep peeing it out. Well, that's because you're not getting enough electrolytes to keep it in. So this is one of the reasons you need to salt things. Another thing, from both a health and performance perspective, all the nerve impulses that go throughout our body in some way or another have a connection to our electrolytes. These are the things that conduct electricity and allow us to express things like maximal strength or maximal endurance, or doing a CrossFit workout. You cannot adequately express the things you want to express in a workout if you don't have the substance that helps these nerve impulses act the way they should, which is the electrolytes, but in particular sodium. And just in general, think of sodium and electrolytes as the spark plugs of the body. They're what help you get going. Another thing we'll see with sodium in particular is it's helpful for adrenal function. A lot of times if someone feels sluggish in the morning, one thing they can do is add a little bit of salt water, and salt and lemon water to right when they wake up, and that will help them kind of get going directly in the morning. So they're the spark plugs of the body. They help the body get going. So that's a basic overview of where we get it and why it's necessary for health. Now let's talk about the practical aspects. How much should you get a day? I'm going to put in the description published peer-reviewed research that strongly suggests that somewhere around 3 to 6 grams a day is healthy for most individuals. Now, you always want to be talking about this with your doctor, talking about your health history and things like that, but roughly around 3 to 6 grams a day. Higher amounts for athletes, not as high for people who are more sedentary. What does this equate to in teaspoons? It's about 1.5 to 3 teaspoons a day. Now, you have to recognize that this is actually a decent bit higher than what's normally recommended. What's normally recommended is somewhere around 1.5 to 2 grams of salt a day, which is pretty low. And the research literature actually suggests that there's a U-shaped curve when it comes to salt usage. People have pretty negative health effects when they consume too little, good health effects when they consume adequate amounts, and not so good health effects when they consume too much. So this is kind of that Goldilocks area of health, 3 to 6 grams a day. How are you going to get this in your food? Again, seasoning your vegetables, seasoning your meat, seasoning your dishes just makes them taste better in general. So that's going to be a good way to do it. And then seasonings pre-cooking, and then post-cooking you can add a little bit of salt on top to give it a little bit of salty flavor if that's what you like. What kind of salt? Celtic sea salt or real salt. These are the best, most unprocessed forms of salt. They don't have any harsh chemicals in them. They have trace minerals in them, although to be fair, the amount of trace minerals in them isn't going to be significant enough to really get you too much in the way of trace minerals amounts, but this is a pretty good starting point for most people. Generally speaking, you're going to want to avoid processed salts. So, a typical table salt or something like that is just going to have a lot more harsh chemicals in it to kind of bleach it and things like that. Sometimes it'll have sugar in it as a way of stabilizing the iodine that's added to it. But generally speaking, I would say as much as you can, try to get Celtic sea salt or real salt, and you're going to be getting a much better option there from a health perspective. What about blood pressure? So when it comes to blood pressure, again, you want to be talking with your doctor about this, but most of the research literature suggests that it's not actually salt that's the issue. It's the balance between sodium and potassium. So potassium is one of the things that helps balance out sodium, and it helps regulate blood pressure. And one of the biggest issues we see today is people are eating tons of junk processed foods with very high sodium with very little potassium. So we actually need potassium in equal or greater amounts to sodium to help balance this out. So again, always want to be talking with your doctor, see what they say goes, but something to talk about with them that's important is this idea that you want to make sure that you're getting adequate potassium to balance out the sodium so that you're not getting this negative effect of too much sodium from junk or processed foods. All right, guys, so hopefully now you've got a good sense of what makes salt healthy, how much you should be getting, where you want to get it, what kind, and a basic overview of how it relates to blood pressure. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.